It is a new year, but it is the same questions being asked of the New York Mets. Welcome into the first episode of 2026 of the Bleav in Mets podcast. It's also the 100th episode of the new era of the Bleav in Mets pod. That is Jack McKessie. I am Chris Schubert, here to talk all things New York Mets. Jack, hope your holiday treated you well. Happy New Year to you. Even though this is technically past the date where you're supposed to wish people a Happy New Year. It's the first time that we've gotten together, so I'll say it anyway. Happy New Year. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, Chris. Happy New Year to you as well. Happy New Year to all of our listeners and our viewers over on the YouTube side of things. It's pretty unbelievable that we're at episode 100 now. I think that's kind of a crazy landmark to hit, and I'm glad that we've been able to stick with this and be dedicated to talking about the Mets. And I just want to, again, thank the YouTube crowd specifically. We've gotten a lot of really good support at the end of 2025 with the viewership over there. If you're not already subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do it. It's my name, Jack McKessie, McKessy, where you can find all the video versions of the Bleav in Mets podcast over there. Yeah, I just very thankful for 2025 and how we were consistent and good about recording throughout a wild season. And I'm excited for 2026, although the Mets are tampering my expectations for next season.
It was funny hopping into the studio today, and before we record, I write down the episode number at the top of every recording studio in the software that we use. And I hopped in and I'm like, oh, this is the 100th episode. And something interesting about the 100th episode being the first episode of a new year. And I said it in the open, though, Jack, it feels like we're right where we left off in our last episode to end 2025, and it is just a relative state of unknown surrounding the New York Mets. We saw all three of the big Japanese players who were supposed to come over, Murakami, Okamoto, Imai. They all choose places that are not the New York Mets. You get the sense that the Mets weren't super invested and interested in those markets. And it's left many Mets fans, myself included, kind of on the sidelines wondering what is next for this team, because as we sit here today, there are a lot of bets that the Mets are making on their roster for 2026. They are betting on a catcher in Francisco Alvarez to continue what we saw post his recall from the minor leagues. They're betting on a first baseman who's never played the position before. They're betting on a bounce back from a second baseman who hasn't been good on the offensive side over the previous 2 years. They're betting on a third baseman continuing the signs of life that we saw from him in 2025. I don't know what they're betting on in the outfield because I don't know who's playing the two outfield positions for them in left and center. And they're betting on a rotation that remains mostly unchanged to bounce back. There's just so many question marks, and I think that's really where the frustration kicks in for many Mets fans, is that you can see the issues. You can see what the team needs to address, but yet up until this point, you haven't really felt like they're aggressive in fixing them.
I just think of all the questions that I had going into this offseason, I will say, like, they have addressed the bullpen, and that's something that I feel decently comfortable with the Luke Weaver, and I'm completely just blanked on Devin Williams' name for a second just there. Additions to the back of the pen, I like, obviously, the idea of AJ Minter coming back from injury, Brooks Raley being part of that back end of the bullpen as well. Outside of that, though, Chris, like, all of the question marks that we had about this roster coming into the offseason have remained question marks as far as the outfield situation, like you said, as far as second base. And then there have been new questions, like left field because of the Brandon Nimmo trade, and because of and first base because of letting Pete Alonso walk in free agency. To a certain extent, third base and the entire pitching rotation, which has plenty of question marks all throughout as far as, are we really expecting David Peterson to have a bounce back? Are we expecting Clay Holmes to be able to continue putting together a solid string of starts the way he did in his first season as a starter? Can you rely on those guys? Can you rely on Kodai Senga coming off of a up and then very down season after his injury? So the thing that I keep coming back to is, like, yes, they've built the bullpen, but there are so many question marks, and all that I have seen as far as big Mets news is, like, players the Mets were interested in ending up elsewhere, players that we were interested in as being potential Mets acquisitions ending up elsewhere, And then recently, like MLB trade rumors saying the Mets have checked in on Kyle Tucker. And like that's been the biggest thing that I've seen basically since we last recorded.
And if we wanted to be optimistic for a second, as we sit here and do this pod today, Kyle Tucker is still a free agent. Cody Bellinger is still a free agent. Alex Bregman is still a free agent. Bo Bichette is still out there. Tarek Skubal hasn't been traded to the Dodgers just yet. Hunter Green is still a member of the Cincinnati Reds. And the point being is that there are pathways for the Mets to get better. There are pathways for them to swoop in if Kyle Tucker's market doesn't materialize the way he anticipated it materializing, and he's not going to get that 6, 7, 8, 10-year deal. The Mets, with Steve Cohen, the short-term high AAV deals that they love to utilize, they feel still poised to swoop in if that opportunity presents itself. The same can be said about Cody Bellinger. The same could be said about the Tigers and their willingness to move Tarek Skubal. So there are still pathways to get better. It's not like we're sitting here a couple of weeks before spring training and Cody Bellinger returned to the Yankees and Kyle Tucker signed with Toronto and Tarek Skubal is a Dodger. And you're like, okay, now I don't see it. I can't figure out the way the Mets are going to improve. I think, at least for me, I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep their options open. They're trying to not lock themselves into a specific roster with these young kids like Jet Williams, like Carson Benj, like AJ Ewing that are coming up through the pipeline. They want to keep their options open while also competing in 26 and 27 and 28 and beyond. It's just the lack of aggressiveness, I think, can be misconstrued as complacency. And I think for many fans, they see the Mets not already having signed both Kyle Tucker and Cody Bellinger as acceptance of this roster. And I don't think they're accepting of this roster. I think they're just being overly meticulous about the players that they bring in. And it can be frustrating. It can be annoying. I know that I'm frustrated and I'm annoyed with the way things have gone, but we keep doing these pods and Kyle Tucker and Cody Bellinger still remain free agents. And it's like, okay, like if they sign one of those guys, it's a complete 180 about how I feel about the offense if Cody Bellinger's out in left field. And maybe we should use that as a segue to talk about Cody Bellinger. But just in general, like one of these signings of the names that I mentioned or a trade of Tarek Skubal, like immediately flips the mindset if they make a big move like that. And all of it is still on the table.
I think another side of this too is something that you texted me about on Saturday, which is the idea that the Mets are looking forward now to promoting some of these guys at the top of the minor leagues to be contributors at the major league level. I mean, as we sit here right now, Carson Benj is like the starting left fielder or center fielder with Tyrone Taylor taking the other spot. And what you said to me was they may be right. The Mets may be right. And Ryan Clifford, Carson Benj, and Jet Williams are awesome. But it's a tough sell to a fan base who just went through a season where, coming off of an NLCS appearance, they were a game short of missing the playoffs, and frankly, down the stretch, did not look like a playoff team at all. And obviously, we're maybe going to look back at this conversation and laugh, and Cody Bellinger and or Kyle Tucker and or Bo Bichette or whoever else is on the Mets, or an alternate future where some of those top prospects come up and they end up being as awesome as the Mets are hoping that they will be. And the Mets look like contenders again, and they have a new core that wins more than their previous core did. And we just laugh about this. But right now, looking at what the team was in 2024 and then in 2025, they look like a worse team on paper in 2026. And it's hard to negotiate that fact with the fact that they have been so big on spending and making the team better through free agency in recent seasons, and they just have not been nearly as aggressive so far this offseason.
I am in full support of the teardown that occurred because I think it was required with how disastrous 2026 was. But if you blow something up, if you tear it down, the expectation is that you're going to rebuild it. And the expectation in the minds of Mets fans, and to a certain extent, I think you and I fall into this bucket as well, is that Steve Cohen is just going to throw money at a problem and they're just going to sign guys. And they haven't done either of that. There hasn't really been a rebuilding, and there also hasn't really been this investment of money. And the reason why I texted you about Clifford is that after Okamoto signed with the Blue Jays, I said, man, they might really think Ryan Clifford can play first base. And the tone of the text message that I sent to you was that they may be right long term, but until we get there and see it, it's a hard sell to say, hey, with Pete Alonso, who hit 30 plus home runs, with Edwin Diaz, who's one of the best closers in the sport, with Brendan Nimmo, who even in a down year is still a productive player, we're going to get rid of those guys. And we're not really going to have a plan to replace any of them. But trust us, even though we only won 83 games last year, trust us, it's going to be better next year. It's just, I want to believe, like, I am growing more and more convinced by the day that if they sign an outfielder, it's either going to be Tucker or Bellinger, or it's going to be somebody like a Harrison Bader, and Carson Bench is getting the other spot. Like, Carson Bench is going to get one of the two spots on opening day. I'm growing more and more convinced by the day that that's their plan. He's going to have every opportunity in spring to win one of those gigs. And so I want to believe in Carson Bench. I want to believe in Jet Williams and Ryan Clifford and AJ Ewing and all these young position players contributing, and Mark Vientos bouncing back and Brett Beatty continuing into 2026. You're just asking me to accept a lot of unknowns when last year you kind of did the same thing and the chickens came home to roost in so many ways.
I think the perfect example of that from last year is the starting pitching rotation that we saw going into last season. You asked us to expect a lot of Griffin Canning, a lot of Frankie Montas, some of David Peterson, which panned out well, but you asked us to rely on Clay Holmes as an experiment, changing from a closer to a starter, working out for a middle of the rotation spot. And I mean, I said it, like the Peterson thing worked out. The Clay Holmes thing, for the most part, was a success. Down the stretch, Peterson kind of crumbled. Kodai Senga, after playing in only that one game, which we'll always have in 2024, but after his injury, completely fell off a cliff. Guys like Griffin Canning, obviously you can't control an Achilles tear, but that was a major factor in, a lack of depth otherwise, where Tyler McGill had a spot in the rotation for a little while. You asked us to rely on Frankie Montas, who started late and then was the worst pitcher that the Mets had in the starting rotation when he did play. And it's like, well, we had all these questions, and then we were kind of proven right by the way that things panned out for the 2025 seasons as far as the pitching went. Because, like, you look at August, the Mets offense had one of the best single months in franchise history, and they still had a losing record. And the same was true in September, where the offense was clicking and the starting pitching kind of doomed things down the stretch and led to the Mets missing the playoffs entirely. So when we're asking these questions again, having once been worried about situations with the roster and not seeing viable solutions, or in our opinion, correct solutions, good solutions, and asking us to trust you, it's a little bit harder once we've been not cheated on, but kind of in the last year.
Yeah, and I think back to how we felt about the team going into 2025, and I'm trying to be really careful because there is still time before spring training. There is still time before opening day, and I'm kind of saving in the back of my mind the full-blown anger and frustration until we see the finished picture. But, to compare it to something that you and I both love, Formula One, we're getting towards the end of the race here, and the standings, they're looking very locked in at this point. Like, I know who's going to win the race. I know we're battling for third or fourth. Like, it's starting to feel like that late safety car is not coming to bail us out of this mess. And we're going to let all the laps be completed, but it just doesn't feel like they're running the right race. And you go back to last year, and yeah, Clay Holmes worked out, but you had a big question mark. Kodai Senga was a question mark because he had that one start. He gets hurt in spring training. David Peterson, could he capitalize on what was a great year the year prior? He did, basically until July-ish, August, before it fell off the face of the earth for him. And then you had Griffin Canning as a back-end option. You had the young kids in the pipeline. And yes, do I think the Mets are more equipped on the starting pitching side to handle some volatility this year than they were last year? Absolutely, because Christian Scott's back. They have McLean. They have Sproat and Tong, who've pitched at the big league level. There's more higher upside options that are readily available that now are major league ready. But still, you asked me to take on some big bets in one area, and now this year, it's maybe not so much with the pitching, but it's at first base, it's at second base, it's at third base, it's at both outfield spots, left and center, it's behind the plate in some regards with Francisco Alvarez, and it just 1, 2, of those bets, fine. I can understand a roster that has one or two of those. I could understand if they had signed Bo Bichette to play second base, if they had signed Cody Bellinger to play left field, and they signed Ryan O'Hearn to play first base, or even Polanco, because I think Polanco's going to be fine at first base, and they stuck Carson Bench in center field, and they asked us, hey, you've got Bellinger, you've got Bichette, you've got Lindor, you've got Soto. We're going to have this guy be in center field. I can accept that. I can't accept question marks all over the place because as much as I trust and believe in David Stearns, it's still baseball. And I just don't know how many of those question marks are going to come through. And that's why they should just sign Cody Bellinger to play left field and solve one of these issues, because he is the guy, in my opinion, Jack, that checks every box that you would need to check for the New York Mets. He plays two positions where we think they have some level of need in first base and left field. He plays great defense at both first base and left field. He has shown the ability to handle New York, which you can't say about many of the other free agents because of what he did in Bronx with the Yankees. And he hits for power. He's going to hit for average. He's going to play great defense. He's a left-handed bat. The versatility is something we know the Mets are going to covet. Like, there's no perfect free agent, maybe outside of Juan Soto last year. Cody Bellinger is about as perfect as a free agent as you could get if you're the New York Mets.
Yeah, and people will think about the way that the Mets have continued to poach former Yankees. But, I mean, the fact of the matter is, like, you just laid out all of the reasons why he is such a good fit for this team. I think specifically to the question marks that we've been bringing up throughout this episode, the two most glaring holes from 2025 into 2026 are the two big spots from the Mets core that they ended up breaking up this offseason. And that's first base and left field with Brandon Nimmo gone and Pete Alonso gone. Cody Bellinger can play both of those positions. He gives you the versatility to do both of those things and be a market improvement in the lineup over what the Mets currently have at those spots, as well as defensively. He's a really good defender. And then at the plate, he's been remarkably consistent outside of his last couple of years in LA, where he's hitting for 260, 265 plus average each of the last 3 years, getting on base more than a third of the time 2 out of the last 3 years. He's hitting for power. His WAR last year on Fangraphs, 4.9 is the second highest in a season since his 2019 MVP year. So, like, this is a player that the Mets could really use to bolster not only their defense, which has clearly been a priority for David Stearns this offseason, but also the lineup and the offense to give someone to hit behind Juan Soto in the batting order and make it look a little bit more dangerous in the middle, where right now you're asking us to have faith in Brett Beatty showing more signs of life, as you put it earlier, and Mark Vientos having some kind of bounce back after, frankly, a dreadful 2025 season.
And Cody Bellinger is much more than this, but he's also a hedge. And he's a hedge in the way that if you sign Cody Bellinger to a 3 or 4 year deal right now, and I wouldn't have any issues with the Mets going to 4 years for Cody Bellinger, that it takes him to his age 34, age 35 season. I think that's well within the range of outcomes that you feel comfortable with what you're going to get return on investment with the deal. You could start him in left field at the beginning of the year. You can try your Jorge Polanco experiment over at first base. You can have Mark Vientos DH if you want. And if Polanco is a butcher over there and it's 2025 Pete Alonso all over again, where we're just not able to throw the ball over to the person covering at first base, we're not turning double plays, and it's a complete disaster, you slide Polanco to the DH spot, which is what he's played previously. You can move Bellinger to first base. You could put Vientos at first base if you want to give that a shot. He's your safeguard. He is your break glass in case of emergency. You can stick him in the outfield and get the plus with his defense. I mean, last year was a 93rd percentile range, 91st percentile arm value, 83rd percentile arm strength. So you get the plus defender, which we know this team's going to love. And if you need to stick him at first base where, let's face it, he's not going to be as valuable as his arm out in the outfield, but you can at least shore up that position because you know Semion's going to provide good defense. Beatty's been a good third baseman. Lindor is the standard at shortstop. So if you move Bellinger to first base, if Polanco doesn't work out, you've now correctly pivoted and your infield defense is not going to be a question mark. And if it works out with Polanco at first base, great. You have an above average left fielder out there playing defense who gets on base, doesn't strike out, plays good defense. I mean, just does everything that a David Stearns player needs to do in order for him to be coveted by this organization. And so, unlike with Kyle Tucker, there's the natural fit in left field too, which also plays a role in all of this. And
Yeah.
it's just surprising to me, Jack, that there isn't more aggressiveness for Bellinger specifically. I could almost rationalize Tucker not being a priority because it's clunky. Where's he going to play? Are you going to move Soto? Yes, he's the younger player. You could stick him at DH, but it's more clunky. I could understand there being a pause.
Longer term contract probably comes into play there, higher value. You're going to have to pay Kyle Tucker a lot more than Cody Bellinger just by virtue of the kind of player he is. But and as well as the fit in the lineup, it doesn't match up 1-to-1.
Would still sign him. Still think he's a good player
Yes,
and would
absolutely.
make the Mets better. But I can wrap my brain around what might trip you up. I don't get what trips you up about Cody Bellinger, if there is anything that's tripping you up.
I'm fully in agreement with you. I think, like, if you wanted to point to one thing just with David Stearns' history, like the fact that Bellinger's on the quote unquote wrong side of 30 could be something that the Mets are looking at. And I don't know if it's about the length of the contract, but it's going to be shorter than whatever Kyle Tucker's going to get. At least that's the projection from most experts. The thing that I keep thinking about for Cody Bellinger is I love the way you phrased him as this hedge option for the Mets as far as defense. He is, in one player, you're solving two questions that the Mets currently have with their lineup and their defense. You're solving your first base quandary and you're solving what's going on in left field. And that is extremely valuable to a team that not only needs those positions on defense, but also on top of that could use the power and the strong bat that Bellinger brings as extra pop in the lineup with Alonso, a 30-plus home run guy, and Nimmo, a 20-plus home run guy, both gone. So,
and how do you not
just
feel
is
better?
A perfect fit.
How do you not feel better about taking a bet on Polanco at first base, taking a bet on Bench in center field, knowing that if either one of them kind of falters, you've got Bellinger there to cover, right? And if you put Benj out in center field, okay, he's flanked by two all-stars, by Bellinger and Soto. It's a great place to learn. And you've got a middle-of-the-order bat that's going to be able to protect Juan Soto and hit, 25, 30 home runs. It's the hedge against Polanco. It doesn't work out for him defensively at first base. Okay. Well, it just allows you to feel better about those question marks that we mentioned at the top of the show that the Mets have on their roster going into 2026. It makes it more, Cody Bellinger's presence makes it more palatable to try Jorge Polanco at first base. Cody Bellinger's presence makes it more palatable to have Carson Bench, your opening day center fielder, right? It just makes these things a little bit more palatable because there's more known commodities elsewhere on the roster. Now, that doesn't solve everything. They still need another starter. I still think they could use another bat as a DH, but it just solves so many issues in one contract to the point where this may be foolish to say, and I may regret these words later. If Cody Bellinger wants a 5-year contract, I think I'd be okay with the Mets giving him a 5-year contract. And I'm not long-term contract guy. Like, I'm actually in alignment with David Stearns and all of the reasons why you wouldn't do that. But, like, I think this is a guy I would break the rules for because he just checks so many boxes for this version of the team.
I 100% agree. And it's not like you're fully limiting yourself either because he has that defensive versatility, right? Like, if you need him to be more of a statue at first base when his range declines, as any outfielders would at that point in his life, like, you have the ability to move him to first base. Polanco's not signed for, a many multi-year deal.
2-year deal.
You have, if you sign Bellinger to a 5-year deal, let's play out the future in which Jorge Polanco is a serviceable first baseman. You have Bellinger out in left field. And then once Polanco's contract is up, you can move Cody over to first base. You assumedly have developed Bench to a point where you can rely on him as on a more consistent basis in the outfield. The Mets have other outfield prospects in the system. And I just can't get over, Chris, how well Cody Bellinger fits for so many reasons. And I don't think the Mets should be limiting themselves in their aggressiveness because they're worried about creating a ceiling for some of their prospects to be unable to crack the major league roster.
And think about the timing, right? Because the other elephant in the room is I don't think Juan Soto is long for right field, but he's 27. 5 years, he's 32. We can start that process then or before then or a year or two before then. Like, you're not going to Cody Bellinger's presence in left field on a long-term deal of 5 years doesn't block the Mets in any capacity.
And that's a long-term deal for the Mets.
Right.
Like 5 years is a long-term for the Mets.
If they can get him on a 3-year deal, super high AAV, it's a no-brainer. It is a no-brainer for the Mets to do this because if we look at it, they really have 3 openings: left field, first base, and DH. And if they bring in Bellinger, now you have Bellinger and Polanco to cover those 3 spots in some capacity, whatever order you want to do it. Don't you feel a little bit more comfortable about the Mets using one of those 3 spots to tinker with, to have Mark Vientos, or to give Ryan Clifford an opportunity, or maybe Ronnie Mauricio gets some run there, and you can mess with it if there's one opening. It's when right now, as we sit here, there's 2, the DH in left field, and you're not so sure what you're getting at first base from Polanco, so it's really kind of 2.5. It just creates more uncertainty. And as we saw last year, the uncertainty coin didn't flip the Mets' way. And you just worry about them doubling down on that approach again when, listen, don't give Cody Bellinger an 8-year deal. Don't give him a 7-year deal. Fine. I can advocate for not being crazy, but a 5-year deal for Cody Bellinger, I don't think is outlandish. I don't think it's you being used to drive up the price. I don't think it hurts you in the short and long term. Now, yes, would I prefer a 3 or a 4-year deal to create more flexibility? Yeah, because what if Cody Bellinger all of a sudden falls off the face of the earth? But he's been a good player over the last 3 years, and he's shown an ability to handle New York. And I'm sorry, but that's going to matter for this team as they try to turn it around, because there were some moments last year where it didn't feel like the players could meet the moment, the bright lights. Cody Bellinger has met the moments. And I just feel like he would be a home run. And I think to end the pod, the optimism is he's still out there. Mets didn't miss. We're not doing this pod telling you all the reasons why Cody Bellinger makes sense for the Mets and he's back with the Yankees, or he signed in Toronto, or he signed with a mystery team. Right there. All you have to do, where's my phone? Just got to pick up the phone and call Scott Boras. That's all you got to do. And that's all you got to do is pick up the phone and ask.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. Like, he's the known commodity that the Mets are currently missing from their defense, from their lineup. He's a hedge option if Polanco experiment at first base doesn't work out. He gives you the ability to tinker with things and not screw around too much with the day-to-day lineup, the way that, maybe the second base question mark went last season, and center field to a certain extent last season. You have a lot more that you can do with the way the lineup is constructed, with the way the defense is laid out, if Cody Bellinger is on the roster, because of the versatility that he brings and because of the extra pop that he provides. I think that the Mets' biggest advantage still, they have a nice farm system, but ideally you'd like to build that up and create a new core. The Mets' biggest advantage is the money that Steve Cohen has as an owner, and the willingness to spend that money on premium players. And you said it best with low year commitment, high AAV is just an absolute no-brainer for the Mets, for a player like Cody Bellinger to just answer some of the questions that are still so glaring on this roster. And fingers crossed that a move happens or momentum starts to increase for the Mets bringing in a guy like Cody Bellinger.
The 100th episode of the Bleav in Mets pod in the books. Here's to 100 more episodes of the Bleav in Mets pod. Episode 101 coming to you later this week. In the meantime, please rate, review, subscribe to the show wherever you listen to your podcast. Share an episode with a friend. The best way for you to help us out and grow this podcast, share this show with a fellow Mets fan in your life. If you'd like to watch the program, you can head on over to our YouTube channel, Jack McKessy, McKessy. If you want to see our beautiful faces for 100 episodes here of the Bleav in Mets pod. We're back later this week. Maybe we should talk about the starting pitching that is out there for the Mets to snag, because they're apparently hot and heavy in the trade market, making phone calls for some starters. So we'll touch on that. And if there's any breaking news, obviously we will cover that as well. As always, let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.